sponsored by the Master's Program in Book Publishing and also by our publishing house, Hooligan Press. I'm really excited to announce, or to introduce our two guests tonight. Georgia Frances King is the editor of Kinfolk magazine, which I'm sure many of you know, a terrific magazine here in town. And Julie Falk is executive director of Bitch Media, which is the publisher of Bitch magazine, which is another really amazing magazine based here in Portland. So please join me in welcoming them to the front.
Thank you. We are excited to be here and to have a conversation and then to invite you all to ask questions. I met Georgia for the first time on Monday in person, and we started a conversation that I think could have gone on and on for hours, so I'm really eager to...
It was one of the situations where the waiter kind of started just prodding us with a check after a little while.
Right, and then we're like, oh my gosh, we have to go, we have things to do.
Yes.
Though I felt embarrassed saying that to someone who's doing slow living and whatnot. But, so tell us about Kinfolk and how it got started. What's your origin story, so to speak?
So Kinfolk was started probably about 4 years ago now. I'm currently in production for issue 17, so that's 4 a quarter. I'm a words person, someone else do the math for me. It was started by 4 friends who actually all met at university. I was the 5th staff member hired on after they got going, probably about 2 years ago. And it's that classic thing that everyone will tell you, and like you'll say this as well with Bitch, is there was a gap on the market for what they were looking for, and that's the reality of how a lot of magazines start. For them, they were at university, and they really felt that the culture of the university was based on big picture stuff, and they were having a lot of dinners in their dorm rooms, and they wanted something that was kind of the Martha Stewart for their era, which they didn't really feel was there, and that doesn't mean napkin rings, and it doesn't mean pinkies up and such. More so, it could be takeaway pizza eaten cross-legged on your floor, surrounded by your dirty laundry on paper plates. Like, it doesn't matter about the food; it mattered about the people around it, and that was the genesis of the idea. 2 of them ran a blog, which already had a little bit of a following, so that's kind of the core people who first read Kinfolk. And they printed 2,000 copies and also gave it the option that you could read it online. No funding, no Kickstarter, no nothing. And those first 2,000 copies sold out in a week. And they were like, okay. So they decided, like, should we print some more? And they're like, yeah, let's just print another 2,000. 3 days, gone. Like, we'll just go up in increments of 1,000. They went up in increments of 1,000 until they sold 7,000 copies of their first issue, which was, at that time, this is just when Kickstarter was really starting to be used for all this kind of stuff, which was quite abnormal. And they went, okay, so when they first started as well, they were expecting people to just want to read the digital version. They were trying to give people choice, and people chose print. So because that they could see that that was what people wanted, they were like, okay, let's do that. How do we do that? Because they were finance people and HR people and design people. None of them studied publishing like you guys. They had no idea what they were doing. And I think that's actually part of their power, is that they had no idea what they were doing, and so they didn't make all the same mistakes that other magazines were making by buying the magazine Publishing for Dummies manuals and going down the advertising path and going into newsstand. So they got in contact with a book publisher because why not? And they were one of the first magazines to start distributing through book publishing channels rather than Newsagent, which is a magazine publishing channel, and decided they didn't want to have advertising, worked out how many copies they would have to sell, worked out the cover price, how many they would have to sell to break even, broke even for the next couple of issues, then started to break a little bit more than even, and now we're issue 17 in production and still basically just breaking even, but yeah, so it was a very, I hate to use this word, but very organic approach to it.
And when was we haven't actually talked about this. When was the decision made to hire an editor, and are you the first editor?
Yes.
And what was the evolution that came to that decision?
The decision to hire an editor was that no one had studied English. Please no one look at the grammatical stuff like pre-issue 10. I was hired because when we first came out, we were fostering in a part of this aesthetic, which is the man-ponied flannel shirt wearing mason jar, salt-baked fish on a pier with trees in the background, that kind of aesthetic, and I apologize for cultivating that. But that's what we were kind of really, and we had this like big like leisure thing placed on us, which wasn't really the point. It was more about community, but people saw images of kinfolk, and it was so refreshing to all of the glossy stuff that was out. And people would pick up kinfolk and flick through it. If you started to read it, it was very floral. It wasn't very straightforward. It was very hard to digest. And they were having a lot of people that were emailing in saying, we love what you're trying to promote, we love the visuals of it, but please can you hire someone that can teach people how to write? And apparently someone thought that I would be that person, which surprised me. This is my first gig editing. I'd come over from the writing side of things. And one thing I will tell you now is that not all editors make great writers, and not all writers make great editors. And I feel very thankful that I'm a much better editor than what I was a writer. But I didn't really know that until someone gave me 144 pages and went, just go do it. And I'm like, okay. So I also didn't know what I was doing, which again, maybe worked to my advantage. You guys can be the judge of that.
So what is kinfolk today? We've heard a little bit about the origin story. What is it today?
So I'm going to kind of get up on my branding high horse a little bit here, which I'm not sure if you guys really speak about this a lot in your classes, but I think it's really important nowadays in this new media landscape to not think about a product that you're creating, but thinking about a lifestyle or an idea that you're promoting. And then whatever products that come through that support that idea. So from the very start, Kinfolk wasn't a magazine, it was a vehicle for us to present this notion of slow living, which, to clarify that, slowing down, simplifying your life, cultivating community, spending more time with friends and family. The way we've been defining it recently is reclaiming your time, because time's really taken away from us. We've lost control of our time. Everyone else controls our schedules. And trick number one is stopping saying, oh, I'm so busy, and using that as an excuse. And then once you've reclaimed that time, work out what is essential to you, what is really important to you, and spend that time doing that. So, which it seems really simple, but then how do you project that through a magazine? So the magazine is a vehicle for those ideas, but outside of the actual print magazine, we're also working in a lot of different realms. We also produce books that explore those ideas in greater detail. So the Kinfolk Table was the first cookbook. People call it a cookbook, but it's half cookbook, half kind of profiles of people, I guess. And what was interesting when we brought that out is that the first 4 or 5 reviews on Amazon are scathing. And they're talking like there is a recipe that the instructions are cut a melon in half, fill it with granola and yogurt, eat. Which for when people place such a heavy food emphasis on us when we first started, that seemed silly. That's not a recipe. And that's like, well, that's real life. I'm sorry, I can't salt poach fish for dinner every night. You know, that's the reality. I eat a bowl of cereal for dinner just like we all do on a Friday night sometimes. And people complained that it wasn't enough recipes and it was too much people, and we're like, that's the point. So never if someone gets angry at you or doesn't like what you're doing for the very reason that you're doing it, that means you're doing a good job of it. An old editor once told me that if all 7 billion people in the world like what you're doing something wrong. So find what you want to do and don't let anyone else tell you that you're doing it wrong. I just got off track. I'm going to get back on track. So what is Kinfolk? So we also produce books. In 3 days' time, I'm putting to rest our next book, which I can probably talk about now.
Please. Yeah.
Just don't go tweeting it. The Kinfolk Home, which will be our first interiors book, which will be coming out later in the year. And we've started experimenting with products as well. So we have a clothing line that also has a homewares line. So it's which is all made of sustainable products. It's all happening out of Japan. Our two main sources of inspiration are Japan and Scandinavia, for the kind of the different versions of the slow living lifestyles that they have. We are moving into some other areas in the next 2 years. We have the big picture, which I probably can't really talk about some of things, but there's the obvious things like cafes and retreats and hotels and all sorts of other different bits and pieces. So instead of thinking about ourselves as a magazine, we're going, what message do we want to send people, and what are the different ways that we can send that?
And can you reiterate, what is the message?
What is the message?
Yes.
That's important.
Yeah.
So I think this is the way that we approached it when we were really trying to refine what are we doing, because we all got caught up in a bit of a whirlwind for the first 3 or 4 years, and then we stepped back and went, oh crap, we have 80,000 readers a quarter I think we're in 112 countries now or something like that. We publish in Japanese and Chinese and Korean and Russian. Soon we're going to probably start Thai and Turkish. And we have 500,000 followers on Instagram and 200,000 on Facebook. And it's just 8 of us sitting in this little office in Portland, putting out content that we think is cool. And that is another thing I will say, is that's one of our barrier points if it doesn't go in the magazine, is does everyone think it's cool? And that's so simple, but if we are tired or sick of an idea, likelihood is that you guys are going to be sick of it as well. But we realized that we had an audience, and that we should probably try to say something, as opposed to just putting things out there that we thought were cool. And the way that you can sometimes work it out is asking yourself, what problem are you trying to solve? So what is the problem in society right now? What are people looking for? And then what is the answer? So you need to give people the answer to the problem that they might not even know they have. And we decided that problem was people aren't spending enough time with their friends and family. They're not spending enough time for themselves. They're putting too much time into their work and to things that don't mean a lot to them. The irony of us working 16-hour days to produce a magazine that tells you to do that, I'm very aware of. But that's selfless, right? Does that kind of get at it?
Yeah, I think so. I'm curious, so coming from my background where, we're a Bitch Media is a mission-driven organization, we're a nonprofit, and indeed one of our ways that we achieve our mission is through our print magazine. And I'm thinking about kinfolk, and you have a problem that you want to solve, and one of the ways to communicate that with people is the print magazine, as you said, but there's also these other things, the books, the products, potentially the cafes or whatnot. So how does this situate kinfolk in today's sort of media universe, and what other companies, maybe non-media companies, would you compare kinfolk to?
So there are quite a few places that are doing a similar model of what we're doing. Monocle is definitely the one that we're most aligned with in terms of the scope of what we're doing. So they have stores, which we haven't branched out into stores yet, but they have just put on a big conference, which was €3,000 to attend. So I can't tell you what it was like, unfortunately. I also didn't have a week off in Lisbon. But they have a variety of different products. They have an entire radio station. They've really worked out how to push those elements out there. But the way that that's really expensive, and kinfolk isn't making much money. Like, Instagram followers do not equate us rolling in it, unfortunately. especially because of the model that we've taken. But Monocle has a creative services unit that services everyone from Lexus to the Four Seasons, and that's how they can generate that income. Other places that do it, Saturday's Surf does it. Acne, as in the jeans that you wear in Acne paper, actually the same company. I'm not sure if you guys knew that. I didn't. So there are a couple of other places that have these brand Bibles. Someone once put it to me that a magazine for these kind of lifestyle brands is the best business card that you can leave on someone's desk. And we talked about this on Monday, that people can go, well, what is Bitch Media? What are you guys about? And you can say, well, here's the magazine that will explain this for you. And that's a way that you can get funding on board, because one of the big differences about Bitch Media versus Kinfolk is a for-profit, barely for-profit, versus a for-profit structure. Sorry, non-profit structure.
So I'm really this issue of branding and identity is so interesting to me. How and there's been knockoffs of Kinfolk and some parodies of Kinfolk. How do both contribute to how you think about your brand and how you want to continue to build your brand?
Oh, the parodies are so good. I love seeing the new ones that come up on Tumblr. There was a really great one the other day. I think it's Henry Rollins, Kinfolk or Not Kinfolk, and it's like either a photo of like the man-ponied guy flannel in the woods, and then like a toilet. And then there's also a great one that has, I think it's photos of Henry Rollins with Kinfolk quotes underneath it, and then photos of Kinfolk with Henry Rollins quotes underneath it. The one that I think did a really brilliant job was The Conspiracy. The Conspiracy, I think, tapped into something really deep about culture nowadays, which is going to tie into all of the copycats is a strong word, but copycats. So The Conspiracy, if you guys haven't seen it, it is a Tumblr that looks at the predominant visuals that we see rolling through our Instagram feeds. So everyone has the image of themselves holding an ice cream cone. Well, it's not them taking the photo. Like how would you ever get like the ice cream cone with the ball from that direction? And the photo of the swirls in your latte cup with the photo of Kinfolk like taken from above. The classic thing of like you being on the tram with your coffee cup in between your knees and like you're showing off your jeans and your shoes, and the autumn leaves, the American flag hanging in the corner of your room, the canning that you're doing. And this person trolled through basically all of these popular Instagram accounts and puts them in grids so that you have like 8 accounts with all of them with the same photo of an ice cream that's in very, very different things and slightly different latte swirl art. And when you look at it en masse, it's kind of creepy. It's really a bit cultish, and a lot of people found this blog and sent it to us being like, oh, they're so cruel, they're so mean. And I'm like, no, they're really getting at something, because what I feel is happening is that people are starting to share a visual language. It's like we're talking to each other and we're forming this community around the images that we share. And it's like saying, I'm part of that club. I'm with you there. And the ironic thing is that, yes, we did do that one photo shoot with the ice cream things, and the ice cream was full of flowers, which everyone now replicates. But we've never had a photo of a latte swirl thing. We've never shown, like, so many of the images that pop up are just what people think Kinfolk is, versus what it actually isn't. But it brings up the whole idea of, well, what's original nowadays? And I've had to get, I believe that Kinfolk is part of the greater collective hive mind. It's part of the collective consciousness of a lot of people being interested in the same things at the same time. And we happen to be the cream that rose to the top of the butter churner. And I feel very thankful that we're in this privileged position, but everything else that has helped us get there, I really support. And if other people are producing magazines or blogs or photography that is very similar, especially visually, to us, and is promoting the same messages, then awesome. Because that's what we're trying to do in the first place, is solve the problem that I was talking about beforehand. And the more people that do that, That's, if we can make that into a community and grow that rather than just cannibalizing each other, I think that's great. That said, serial writers aren't allowed to write for me, but
that's a thing. Yeah, tell us about Serial and maybe those folks.
So Serial was started by former kinfolk contributors, Richard Aslan and Rosa Park, over in London, and they are lovely. I love them to shreds. Richard's writing is really great as well. And they saw at the same time that we were growing in America, they saw the need for it in England and started it up in England. And they've kind of parted away and found a niche now, which is in the travel side of things. But I, as an editor, I've worked mostly for niche publications. And in the niche world, you often have a lot of small magazines doing similar things. And I think it's really important for the reader to be able to pick up those different publications and buy a Kinfolk and buy a Serial and buy a Trove and buy a Drift magazine and be able to feel like they're having a different experience each time. And that means having writers that only write for certain magazines and photographers that only photograph for certain magazines. Otherwise, you end up with a wash. And then everyone loses their unique qualities. So, but that's really hard to tell someone sometimes that if they're a photographer, for an example, you do such a good job and that you're working for these other great magazines that you can't work for us because we want things to feel different.
That's interesting. That makes sense to me. How does that work practically? I mean,
terribly. Oh, you feel so terrible. It's the hardest part about being an editor is saying no to people, especially for reasons that have got nothing to do with their talent.
Is there a statute of limitations? Can you, like, if you wrote for them 5 years ago?
They're definitely like, but then you just like, there's like contracts get involved,
Yes.
and how impersonal the contracts, but they're
Right,
required. It's really hard when you're quite a community-based magazine because that's how we really built ourselves up. It wasn't just throwing this product out there. We used to do launches in all the major cities this was like back when we were still selling 4,000, 5,000 copies. Go around and, invite every reader who bought a copy in, and now we can't do that anymore. So it's a matter of how you start scaling these things that worked when they were really small, and then people expect you to be able to keep it up. But now there are 80,000 readers an issue, and that's not always the same readers every time, and trying to keep everyone connected is it's really tough.
A question we get a lot at Bitch is who is our target audience, and we have to step back from that and say, we're a nonprofit organization. We don't operate with the same business model as advertising-driven publications that want you to have a target audience, want to be able to define that, and we all know what that target audience is supposed to be. But tell me about how Kinfolk thinks about the concept of a target audience.
So this is something that I've learned, especially working in niche media, is you will always be surprised with who is reading the magazine that you're putting out or the book that you're writing. We start with like our 13, 14-year-old Instagram junkies who obsessively follow every move that we have, all the way through to the 80-year-old grandmothers who handwrite us letters to complain about the point size in the magazine.
We get those too.
Yeah, we were just like telling a story about how.
Absolutely, yeah. I was saying that it seems like consistently that's the feedback that we get, and sometimes we don't get any really negative feedback through the mail about a recent publication, but we get that almost every time.
I'm just going to quickly tell my story about my favorite piece of hate mail.
Please do.
Oh, I love it. Send me mail. My favorite piece was a hand pressed paper, handwritten, sent to me, telling me how much they hated me, and then it had a wax seal. Like someone had actually dripped wax and done a seal on it. I wrote them back and I kept it. It's just a reminder of but again, that's a thing of, if people are going to hate you for what you're doing well and what you're trying to do, go ahead, wax seal something and send it to me. But in terms of target audience, you can have this huge breadth, and then you can get stuck with thinking, well, I need to please everyone. And you're not going to please everyone. You're not going to please those 7 billion people, like I said before. So you do need to focus on, well, who are the people I really want to please? And then hone in on them, but be aware that everyone else around them that is either side of that bracket probably wants to be them. Because you're not just selling people a magazine, you're selling people an idea, you're selling people an identity. To have a kinfolk on your coffee table says something about you. To have a bitch, if you're on the tram, you can assume things about people by the products that they wear or that they're reading. So for the people who are outside of our target audience.
Which is what? How would you define your target audience?
So we say 25 to 35. 70% female, 30% male, employed, college degree, not doing like really, really well, but still has like a little bit of money every now and then to throw at things. But people who want to choose where they throw their money. And the reason why we always have to talk about money in this situation is that you often have these target audiences because of advertisers, because advertisers then want to know, well, who is your target audience? Who is reading?
How much money do they have to spend?
Because what's the point of putting a Gucci ad in there? Not that Gucci would ever be in kinfolk, but putting a Gucci ad in there if no one's going to be able to afford it. So there's also a difference between aspirational and inspirational. I think that there's nothing wrong with being an aspirational magazine of something that you want to look up to and something you want to get to, as long as that aspiration has inspiration of how you can actually achieve it. So we try to, we often get a lot of people, one of the main bits of negative feedback we get is that we're too luxury, that we're promoting a lifestyle that is all about leisure, and some of us have to work and some of us don't earn that much money. And I remember getting this email from someone who was used as the perfect example, the cover of issue 4, which is of this couple sitting on a beach on a log with 2 cups of like camping coffee, and they use that as the example of this privileged lifestyle. And I'm like, well, maybe there isn't a beach that you can go sit on, maybe it's just a couch, but surely we can all take a moment out of all of our days to sit down and just share a cup of coffee with someone. And people sometimes take things very literally, I find, in those circumstances, because we're both used to getting negative feedback. It's just, you can't always give people exactly what they want, but again, if you're giving the people who you're trying to speak to what they want, you kind of have to be understanding of the people who fall outside of that.
I'm thinking more about the slowing down and this connecting in this community, and it all sounds very good, and
yes.
It all sounds very seductive, and why not? But why? I mean, why? I mean, why the passion for slow living? Where does that come from within the within the company and within the community that's asking for it?
Well, I think that there are, I'm just thinking of books that everyone should read that will convert you to this. One of them is called Essentialism by George McEwen. It's great, you can see everyone's pencils like being picked up. Another one is In Praise of Slowness by Carl Honoré. And these were 2 books that when I first started working there, it was kind of, the here is the reading material for the next couple of years of your life. And I moved here from New York. I'm Australian, that's the accent. I've just realized I haven't clarified that at all. I'm from Melbourne. I moved to New York a couple of years ago. And I'm that fast-paced person who works far too much and was starting to burn out. And I think that people often forget nowadays that there is an option not to do that. And sometimes all you need is the reminder that you don't have to be working yourself to the bone. It's really important for you to put yourself out there and work very hard. But when you continually say yes, you forget that you can say no, and other people also forget that you can say no. And and we feel that we have to say yes to every opportunity that comes up. And there's a time in your life when that is important and that you should do that. But when you start saying no and trying to overload yourself less, people respect that. Like, I know that I have writers that I will give assignments to, and they'll be really great assignments, and they could say, I'm sorry, actually, I'd probably have to work the next 2 weekends in a row to get this done on this deadline, and, you know, my mum's going to be in town. Sorry, no. And I'm sitting there really respecting them that they've put other things first that haven't been work. And I know that they've probably sent that email and have hit send and felt really guilty about it, like they're losing opportunity, where I've actually respected them more for making that choice. But you need to break the cycle.
I was recently in the offices of White Kennedy, and some of you here have been in the offices of Bitch. I'm wondering, are there quotes around the kinfolk offices from essentialism and in praise of slowness, or how do these kind of these thinkers and these writers
Actually
come into the office culture?
When you walk into our office, the first thing that people say is, "Whoa, I'm in the pages of Kinfolk magazine." Like, it's all white walls and like tiki furniture. Sorry, teak, T-E-A-K-Y, not tiki as in T-I-K-I. That's my accent. That doesn't work. I have to keep that in mind. It's quite minimal, but I'm in my kinfolk attire today. I'm normally in some very brightly coloured 1950s dresses. This is my more subdued coloured 1950s dress. A lot of people will think that they can't be a kinfolk reader because they don't have the perfect white couch, and that they wear too much colour. And again, it's everyone placing kinfolk into this aesthetic rather than the ideas. And I really like to try to use myself as an example of someone who wasn't a slow lifestyle person. I'm a terrible cook. I can't take a photograph to save my life. I have a pretty kooky dress sense, and when I first walked into the office, I kind of said, I really respect that I'm here and that you've asked me in here for this interview, but I just want to know why. This feels like an odd mix. And that's when they started talking more about the concept of not being sold on an aesthetic or a product, but being sold on an idea, and everyone can find what they want in that.
But there's such a consistent aesthetic.
Yes.
So that is in service of what? Why is there the need to be so consistent as an editor? So I'm thinking, you know, you are editing the words, but you're also
editing the visual language.
Yes, and that's in service of this.
It's a good question. I think that knowing what makes you different is really important, which is another reason why I think it's important that similar magazines don't use the same stable of writers and photographers. But also being able to become an adjective, I think, I feel really blessed that we've, because now you'll have, I want to have a kinfolk wedding, I want to have a kinfolk baby shower, let's throw a kinfolk style dinner party tonight. Makes me gag a little bit, but the fact that, because often that means mason jars and floral crowns and everything that we haven't been for 3 or 4 years, because people have taken that aesthetic and have run with it and made it their own thing, which is great because it's still promoting the same values that we have. But I think being able to align yourself to something that people can see and recognize as being you, because you would understand that with all of the different types of feminist literature that there is out there, and it's like, well, we're all kind of going towards the same greater goal. How do we make sure that there are different voices and different avenues that people can choose to be a part of, rather than just being swallowed up by the melee of it all?
And we're very happy that bitch can be an adjective and a descriptor. Yeah.
In a slightly different way.
Right. Yes. So I am not as familiar with the evolution of kinfolk and its aesthetic, but I am curious, and maybe other people are too. No more flower crowns. So there's been a departure from the flower crowns to
where is it going?
And where did they go and why?
They went to Coachella. No, really, they did. It's a matter of, you often have to, so where did the flower, that sounds like a Beatles song, where the flower crowns go. I think it's really, one thing that was really tough for us when I came on board, everyone was picking up this very twee, woodsy aesthetic. And it became a trend, and we were at the forefront of that trend. And that's when kinfolk became the adjective. But we became very aware that if that trend died, we would die with it. And you have to be very self-aware about your brand and where it fits within the greater media landscape to understand the fine line between playing to what people want and giving them what they're going to soon want and getting them used to it, so that you just don't have to suddenly make a huge change and you lose everyone. So we slowly started transitioning away from the, as soon as the flower crown started turning up in Coachella, it's like, okay, mainstream media's got it, they're going to turn it into its own beast, we're going to lose control of what we're saying because other people will be saying it for us and they might be saying it as well as us. And so we wanted to mature a bit. I often liken kinfolk to the Macaulay Culkin or the Drew Barrymore child star who had to grow up in the spotlight and make all their mistakes in the spotlight, like flower crowns. I don't hate flower crowns, by the way. Like there is a time and a place for daisy chains. But we had to very slowly bring on that evolution. And one of the things from an editorial standpoint was I had to come in and slowly get rid of a lot of the very floral, overwrought writing, that there were a bunch of people who really liked that and went to kinfolk for that. And that was really hard for me, both having to reteach the readers about what the editorial style of the writing, but also having to tell all of the writers that I was using that had been, that the direction that we were moving in was changing.
And I'm curious, did you help? How much did you help inform that new direction as the incoming editor, and how much was it? You know, there had been a conversation about, you know, the direction of kinfolk, and could you move the company forward in that way, or how much did your vision play into where kinfolk is heading?
Nathan Williams, who is one of the 4 founders and the creative director behind the company, who has the vision for where everything is going. I have a very good relationship with him and what he wants to project, because this isn't my company. I feel very lucky that I'm working for them and that they've hired me to bring in all of my eccentricities and oddities into it. So I worked very closely with him and in where he wanted to push things, which was the same direction I wanted to push things, which was one of the reasons why I was hired. And I brought in some of my writers that I'd been working with and sought out new writers to start working with. One thing I will say is that I am the person who reads all the emails that come into submissions at kinfolk.com. I read every single email. I worked at magazines before where that email is a black hole that never gets checked. If you send an email and request a theme guide for the next issue, you'll be put on a mailing server. It'll be sent out. If you pitch, I actually do read them. And I have found 4 writers in the past 6 months that have had work published in kinfolk that were cold calls. Total cold calls. One of them hadn't even been published ever before, and she now writes 2 stories in a shoot for me. And she was a local Portland girl as well, Margaret Everton.
So is there kind of a staple of freelancers that you go back to, and what's the vision for the number of writers, or how submissions would come in, and how does that work?
So I probably get maybe 2,000-3,000 pitches in a shoot, which takes me a week to go through them all, because again, I actually read them all. I have about 20 writers that I use regularly that I pull from. Of that, there's maybe 10 writers that definitely have a piece in every issue. But it's kind of like having your kooky family. So when we have different story ideas, that it's a mixture of ideas that they've pitched and ideas that we've come up with. And if they've pitched an idea and it's also an idea that was on our list, that naturally instantly goes to that writer. but then there are ideas that we don't have that writers have that we might run with, and there are a lot of ideas that we have that then we match writers with. But I come to know my writers' strengths and my writers' weaknesses, and then I can match up articles, which this is what I was doing all day the past 2 days, is looking at what a different writer can bring to a piece. And one of the toughest things about working in magazines versus working in directly book publishing is that you have, I have up to 20 writers an issue, and they all have very different tones. And when I'm editing different people's writing, how can I allow their voice to still shine through while still fitting into the overall voice of the magazine? And that's really, really tough. And part of that is cultivating writers that work together as a whole in some way, but all still have very unique takes on things. And it's one of those hard things, unless I was like line editing a piece of work for you here, I couldn't really explain exactly how to do it. But it's sometimes simple things like, where do you place the adverb in a sentence, and making sure that that's consistent through the magazine, just so that people feel like they have their hands held, even if they don't realize that they have their hands held.
Very interesting. So I think I'll ask one kind of final question, and then we'll open it up for questions from everyone else. What's next for kinfolk?
What's next? We have some exciting and terrifying prospects ahead of us. We are actually splitting our office in two, and half the office is moving to Copenhagen next month, which is a thing that is happening very soon in the middle of two deadlines. So our office is in disarray right now. My team, I'll be heading up the team in Portland, and basically Kinfolk magazine will remain in Portland, and the other Kinfolk ventures will be moving to Copenhagen, where we have a lot of our collaborators over there. And a lot of people are like, well, why Copenhagen, aside from the fact it's beautiful? But they really have it together when it comes to slow living. Socialist community helps. 5 weeks off a year, and we recognize that that's not a thing that we know that we can have a social change right now in America, but just reminding people that there are other options and ways of living out there, and sometimes you have to start that at the grassroots level to then move it up. So if slowly we can all start saying no to our bosses more often, and bosses become more used to hearing that, it's a lot easier to try to affect change from that way, rather than us going, well, maybe the next project that we should do is hiring a bunch of lawyers and politicians and going in government level top down, which probably would not work. I think people have bigger problems. So our next goal is working out the next ways that we can expand the brand to further promote the message that we are trying to say, and that will be through mostly publishing realms next. So there are more books coming out. There might be more magazines coming out.
You're the editor of the books as well?
Yes. I'm the editor of the book that I'm just finishing up right now, but our team's probably going to be expanding in Copenhagen. And I think that's a really interesting, because normally it's very normal for a large company to have offices everywhere, but to split a small company into kind of divide and conquer two different areas of the world, I think it's a smart idea. I'll let you know in 6 months.
You have daily staff meetings, right?
Yes, we have two. We have a check-in at 9 a.m. and so we work in 8 to 5 roughly. We have a check-in at 9 a.m. which is all work-related things to make sure that everyone's on the same page, because we're only a team of 9, and we all wear different hats, but we're all very much so in charge of each area that we have. So making sure we're on the same page together, and then we break for tea time at 3 o'clock, which started just because we are hungry people, and we also like to bake. I don't like to bake, I like to eat the baked goods. And so 3 o'clock comes along, and for 20 minutes, no talk of work. It's a break that brings us together, because often you'll be in a workplace with someone, especially when you're working on a very solitary project like line editing, and you can be in the presence of people all day and not actually speak to them. And I think that's important to cultivate those work communities as well.
how will you do check-ins and tea time?
We are trialing
internationally.
we are trialing so many different work software right now. If anyone has any options aside from like Asana and Basecamp and Red Booth, like please let me know. Skype, coffee.
What's the time difference with Copenhagen?
8 a.m. our time is 5 p.m. Copenhagen time. So we're gonna have flexible work hours. They're not gonna know if I've got a beer at 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. So yeah.